Hi, everyone. This is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery. Today, I'm excited to have Alexej Pikovsky, who's the founder of Alphagreen that provides CBD products for health and wellness in the UK. He started his career in M&A at Nomura, where he worked on multi-billion dollar transactions in chemicals, natural resources, and power, and was earlier principal at Delin Ventures. Alexej has a master's in energy finance from Imperial College London. A big thank you to Joseph Corner for the introduction. Welcome to the show, Alexej.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you have an interesting career. You started off in the venture capital world and got into the world of startups. How did you get your start, and why did you want to build Alphagreen?
Sure. So I started trading equities when I was 16 years old, which meant that I started looking at businesses very early on. The route into M&A was because I wanted to learn more about the fundamentals of a business and how to value a business properly. And then when I was in M&A, I realized, okay, the better life is on the buy side. So I was trying really hard to get to a place where I start investing in companies. And so I moved into a family office where I ran venture capital, investing in seed Series A tech companies in the UK and also VC funds. And then after 2.5 years there, I received an offer from a 3 billion private equity fund and joined them, where I also managed to sit on the board of a very large business in Germany, sold that one. And that's where I got the idea to build something on my own, because I guess when I was also in VC, working for the family office, I was looking at a lot of different decks, meeting a lot of different entrepreneurs, but I never had the conviction to go out and do something on my own. But then working in private equity, I first of all saw how to run a business, because in private equity, you're very, very hands-on. But also during the time at private equity, the cannabis market in North America grew really, really fast. And I realized, okay, nobody's doing anything in the cannabis space in the UK and Europe. Maybe there is something for me to do. And I then traveled Canada and California, met more than 50 companies, and thought, okay, actually, if we build a marketplace, we can leverage the fragmentation in the market and build something really powerful in the UK and Europe before, let's say, the Americans come over. And that's how we started. So we started really more with a timing, a macro vision. The marketplace as a model came because I had a good friend of mine who was a CTO at another marketplace. And I basically told him, look, why don't we build something in the cannabis space? And his skill set was in the marketplace building. So it was very natural for us to say, okay, yeah, let's do a marketplace initially and then see how it goes. And we kind of evolve into other areas. And so that's how we initially started.
You know, it's interesting that you looked at the CBD market, but do you think, do you think CBD will become more mainstream, or is it, will be more susceptible to societal norms where, it can't really be more mainstream?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess looking at North America again, it started with initially CBD and then medical cannabis and then recreational. So I would say I expect the same to happen in the UK and Europe. CBD is becoming more mainstream. If you go on to the main street, Harrods, Holland & Barrett's, Tesco, they all sell CBD by now. Quality is a very different question, but it is fairly mainstream. There is definitely not enough education though. So people don't actually know what to use it for, how to dose it. And so that's where we really come into play. And we did actually a study with 5,000 participants, and we had 11% of the UK population. I mean, obviously that was, 5K, and then we kind of took a percentage, but it was an equivalent of 11% of the UK population have heard about CBD, which is a fairly big number if you think about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you've also building a marketplace, which is, do you think it's more like, Thrasio for the CBD marketplace, where you're focusing only on, CBD products?
So I guess the evolution of Alphagreen was first the marketplace. We then built an agency providing growth services, so SEO, performance marketing, email marketing, web development, 2 brands on our marketplace. We then, after raising in total 3.5 million pre-seed money, went into incubation of brands, and we now launched our sleep care brand called Yawns. It's a brand with ashwagandha, valerian root, a 5-HTP, and a morning pill with guarana and mushrooms. And we're now working on an insect protein brand as well called PetCan. But ultimately, that was the next chapter, or is the next chapter. And then most recently, we received a few inbounds from very exciting health and wellness brands. And we realized, given there is so much available debt funding out there, and the businesses such as Thrasio are aggregating a lot of different businesses and ramping up revenue that way rather than organically, we understood that actually that's something we could also do. But I would say the big difference is that we are very, very specialized in the health and wellness space. So we wouldn't call ourselves an aggregator. We would call ourselves more a strategic buyer if we acquire brands.
All right. And, I want to follow up on the strategy. What are the sort of margins, and, how are these direct consumer brands typically valued? And how do you look at which companies to acquire for your portfolio?
Sure. So direct to consumer brands are valued, if they're fast growing, they're still valued at sales multiples, although the better metric to look at is contribution margin 2, which means it's sales minus cost of goods sold minus other variable costs such as payment processing, fulfillment, and discounts. And then you have, so to say, contribution margin 3, which is also minus acquisition costs of a customer, right? So your PPC, etc. But usually you look at a contribution margin 2, and I think, for example, in CBD, you're looking at around 60 to 70% contribution margin 2, depends on the format as well. Is it an oil, a capsule, a patch, a drink? So that there is a difference, but it's a very, very high margin, let's say, category. Same applies for beauty and cosmetics. If you look at supplements such as protein powder, because it's so commoditized, the margins are much, much smaller. So you're looking at contribution margins probably around 50%. And then you usually have acquisition costs, which are fairly high because, again, it's a very competitive space. So you end up with, in a lot of times, you end up with just kind of single-digit percentage profit margins on a unit basis, unless you have a recurring model where where customers keep returning, which means you don't have that acquisition cost element anymore, and you can kind of of course, increase your margin, therefore quite a lot, and therefore your long-term customer value is actually more than your customer cost of acquisitions. But yeah, ultimately, if it's a fast-growing brand, people still value it at revenue multiple. And that's of course, if you're like a completely independent brand. Of course, talking about Thrasio and looking at how aggregators value brands, because a lot of them only look at Amazon brands, and Amazon brands are usually run by one person or maximum 2. Right. They actually look at a metric called SDE, seller discretionary earnings, and that's a multiple which is net profit plus the founder's salary, because you basically argue that, okay, after buying that brand, you get rid of the founder, for example, therefore you can add back his salary or hers, and that's the multiple. And then I guess a year ago, the multiples there were 2 to 3 times SDE. Because of that hype in the aggregation landscape, we're looking at 4 to 5x SDE multiples now, which now represent around 1x sales.
Oh, no, this is pretty insightful. And what does Alphagreen do to the products and the companies that acquired? Do the operators stay with the team, or do you let them go?
So the brands we're currently in discussion to acquire, we actually would have the founders stay on and work through an earnout structure. Now, because we are not acquiring brands in the same kind of frequency as somebody like Thrasio, where they're trying to do 20, 30, 40 deals a year, we are much more selective, and we are more a strategic buyer in our category, health and wellness. And most of the time, there is a certain supply chain element, which is quite specific. And there is a big benefit actually of keeping the founder, because the founder just knows the supply chain really well. The founder knows the competition really well. And because we are really going after the same cause, which is, helping people, improving their sleep, coping with anxiety, reducing their pain, a lot of the time, the founder of the business we're acquiring is also interested to continue working for the same cause, and of course, be part of a bigger platform such as Alphagreen.
Got it. And especially for direct-to-consumer founders who looking to scale up their businesses either on Amazon or on their own Shopify stores. How important is the building of trust and brand building so that they don't rely only on PPC ads or on paid ads. What advice would you give to them to build a brand presence?
Well, a brand can be built in multiple ways. We built our brand purely on organic search, which meant that we had to publish a lot of content. So we publish on average 200,000+ words a month. This is because we also have more than 10 full-time content writers writing day and night. And that's more like a CapEx, right? It's a compounding asset, which with time is more valuable because you keep ranking well in Google, and you keep, of course, publishing even more, and you keep ranking even better, and so on and so forth. With PPC, you can, of course, also build a brand. It's more difficult in the sense that if somebody knows you have a niche and it's working, people will start bidding on it straight away. And therefore your CPC will go up, and you might not be profitable anymore. And the other element is PPC works as long as you have money. If you don't have money, you won't have any traffic. With SEO and organic search, you will continue to have that. Now, looking at a lot of the newer brands in certain categories, such as, again, beauty, for example, influencers are very, very strong growth channel there as well. Again, with influencers, you can definitely build up a proper organic brand presence as well, but it does cost a lot of money initially. And then finally, you also have channels such as affiliate marketing, where you work with other affiliate platforms and publishers to drive traffic to your site, a lot through discounting. So again, this is probably not for the kind of luxury brands, but more for the slightly, affordable brands, so to say. So yeah, there are lots of different ways, but yeah, building brand is definitely very, very important.
And again, following up on Amazon, because there's a lot of direct consumer brands who have a good presence on Amazon. How do you compete with Amazon Basics and some of the Chinese competitors who could always come and take your listing away, basically hijack your listing? So any suggestions on how to compete with a big brand like Amazon Basics?
Sure. So, well, similar to Amazon, we've also built a marketplace, and we of course also see a lot of data, which allows us to launch brands in interesting categories, similar to Amazon launching private label if they see a really interesting category. The problem with Amazon, and we've interviewed actually a lot of different Amazon executives and product category managers for roles at Alphagreen, and we're continuing to interview. But all of them are basically saying Amazon doesn't know how to build a brand, apart from, of course, Amazon itself. And so what you have is that you don't really have too many Amazon Basics ranking or selling, as well as some of the other category leaders, which, for example, Thrasio and the other guys are also acquiring. So building a brand on Amazon, it's not easy because you have to play a catch-up game with reviews and marketing, but it's still possible if you are in a category where there is a lot of search volume and you can figure out the supply chain. I think the point on Chinese, now the supply chain is a lot of the time Chinese, even though some of the brands might be European. And it doesn't mean that it's bad or it's good. It's just in some categories such as electronics or a lot of the bedding stuff like pillows and weighted blankets, etc. It's literally 90% Chinese suppliers. Doesn't mean it's bad quality. There are a lot of high quality Chinese suppliers, but it's as difficult for a Chinese player to come in and rank really well on Amazon as for a new player based in the UK or Germany.
Got it. And you talked about Chinese manufacturers, and do you think some of the products will cease to exist in case there's a trade war which escalates between US and China and across the world? Do you think relying on Chinese manufacturing for a long time has not been beneficial, or do you think it really doesn't matter going forward?
Well, we that's where we go back to the brand value, right? So if you have a brand and you have a loyal customer following, then you can just choose your supplier. And to be honest, suppliers are very, very similar. A supplier in Germany for pillows or again sleep masks or whatever is probably very, very similar to supply in China, except that the Chinese one is probably cheaper, including the shipment. But if there is a trade war or any other barriers, of course you can change your supply chain. It will definitely cause some interruption. So you might want to run a dual supply chain setup before you kind of like switch to another one completely. But yeah, I think when it comes to ingestibles, which we really know well as a category, and also topicals, we can actually make the same product with 3 different manufacturers. So we don't actually have that much supply chain risk for our own brands. But with devices, we are talking to some brands, and there are always 2 or 3 other suppliers to not have that risk.
And especially with companies like Amazon and Shopify, which is given which has been a great help to third-party sellers. What has offline retail companies like Walmart and Tesco are doing to combat Amazon? Do you think going forward it's going to be Amazon which is going to be the market leader, or do you think even for retail companies like the Tesco's and the Walmarts can compete with Amazon going forward?
Yeah, Amazon is a big business, right? And everybody's trying to compete with Amazon now because they became so powerful, and that's not only because they are, let's say, quite smart and know what to do and how to scale, but it's also because a lot of other players, such as Walmart, didn't move fast enough initially. As you know, Walmart then acquired Flipkart, right? And of course, they also have the online presence themselves, which is pretty good as well now. So you can actually argue that in the US, Walmart is gaining as much market share from other offline players as Amazon is. And in fact, I've seen numbers where actually Walmart performing actually better than Amazon recently. eBay is making a comeback as well. And then don't forget that you have certain categories, right? So like the same way Alphagreen IO is now Europe's leading marketplace for CBD and alternative healthcare products. And we are outranking Amazon, we are outranking Holland & Barrett's in some instances. The same way you have different marketplaces and different offline stores with an online presence in certain categories, such as pets, for example, with Chewy, or you have some beauty offline stores and online stores outranking Amazon. So I would say the future is, of course, more competition, but the future is also much more curation and specialization by category.
Got it. And do you think you also would want to have an offline presence going forward, just to have a presence in Europe and UK, and people would want to touch and feel those products?
Yeah. That's really interesting. And we saw Amazon recently opening up the first offline store in the UK.
Right.
And we also know that, for example, there is a deal in Poland. Allegro is actually acquiring an offline setup as well. In the alternative healthcare space and kind of the space where we work, which is around sleep, pain, and anxiety, there is definitely an advantage if you have a physical store, because people want to try a new product for sure. That can be achieved also through pop-ups and different installations, which are temporary and wouldn't really make you asset heavy. So I would not go as far as to say, okay, we're looking to do something in the physical space, but we could probably do some pop-ups down the line. Yeah.
Got it. And this is for direct to consumer brands. What do you think are some of the reasons that they want to sell their business? Is it more like making profits and cashing out and looking at different opportunities?
A lot of them usually reach their limit. So for example, on Amazon, a lot of them know that if they want to grow, they need to hire more people. They can't just work alone anymore. And that's when they think, okay, well, if there is a Thrasio coming who is prepared to pay 5 times, SDE, why not? And I just start another business and also buy a yacht on the side, right? So I think a lot of the motivation is driven by realizing they've reached the limit, and also realizing that right now it's a really hot time to sell a business, and it's a really good time for them to cash out. When you think about direct to consumer outside Amazon, a lot of the time people sell because maybe they want to retire, or they also see that competition is increasing and their growth strategy is not working unless they would raise much more money. Some people don't know how to raise money, so they are saying, okay, let me exit it. And sometimes it's just also owned by already another entity, and then the entity is just saying, okay, yeah, we can get a good deal here. Why not sell it to somebody, such as the Hut Group or another consumer group?
Got it. And what could be the other reasons for D2C brands to get out of Amazon? Amazon can provide a great leverage to sell their products, but do you advise D2C brands to get out of Amazon, or do you think it's fairly okay to have the presence only on Amazon per se?
It depends on your resources. In an ideal world, Amazon would be one of your sales channels, similar to offline being another channel, direct to consumer being another channel, a bunch of other marketplaces being another channel, affiliate network being another channel, right? And maybe even social commerce being also a channel. The reality is though, when you're launching a brand, you're initially fairly limited with your resources, and you have to decide what growth channel to go for. A lot of the entrepreneurs who are on Amazon went to Amazon because you almost can argue it's the lowest entry barrier to actually get your revenue, because you benefit from the traffic on Amazon already. If you have a direct-to-consumer brand, which is based on a Shopify or WooCommerce or Magento, you still need to get that traffic up by ranking in Google. Versus in Amazon, if you're lucky with a category, you might have sales pretty fast without spending that much money, just because you're in a really, really niche category and there is demand for it. So I would say a lot of the established brands on Amazon have also offline and online presence outside Amazon. And a lot of the value add, you can argue, by the likes of us, Alphagreen or Thrasio or Purge, is by buying an Amazon only brand and then scaling that brand outside Amazon. And that's why we developed our own in-house growth agency called New Optima to actually scale brands outside Amazon as well, but also help brands who are not on Amazon yet to go on Amazon and scale on Amazon.
Got it. And you started Alphagreen before COVID. Do you think the pricing and valuation of direct to consumer brands have changed post COVID?
So I guess the valuations pre-COVID were already quite punchy, and we've been seeing a bull market for the last 10 years.
Right.
COVID initially had a damper on the valuations because everybody panicked, but the reaction by central banks and pumping a lot of money into the system resulted in just a lot of money out there now, which goes into pension funds, from pension funds into VC funds, from VC funds into private companies. And so you have that spiral where, yes, valuations continue to actually grow. And it just happens that direct-to-consumer brands and e-commerce platforms are a big beneficiary of the pandemic, because the online penetration and the habits of going online to buy change and kind of like accelerated exponentially, and created a bigger market for all these brands to go after.
Got it. And Alexej, you've been part of OnDeck Scale program. Before the podcast, I talked about how I was part of the podcast fellowship. Do you think such communities like OnDeck and Y Combinator and all can replace universities and and the resources available for students, or do you think it's something which is ancillary to your education?
Yeah, so OnDeck, I love OnDeck. I'm part of the Scale cohort there, which is for founders who have either at least 1 million ARR or raised at least 3 million. The concept of OnDeck is, as you rightly say, it's a bit of a hybrid between Stanford and Y Combinator without them taking any equity, but providing that lifelong education and the community. So I would say I really like the model. The community element is great. The continuous learning element, it's good. I think it's something they probably going to improve on even more. Can it replace university? Look, that's a big question, right? I think university is still good and important because it's for people to really learn how to learn. And I would almost argue that not knowing how to learn, you wouldn't really get the same value out of OnDeck. And so I still think there will be always a need for university and higher education. But maybe in the future, it will not be 3 or 4 years, but more like 1 or 2 years. And then you have the OnDecks of the world providing that continuous education element going forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great opinion. It's more like a hybrid of education and community, and I think universities are really important. Just going forward, it needs to keep evolving, just like how the corporate world has. Alex, I quickly want to do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
So my favorite business book is Fast Scaling by Patrick Felsner, which is a book not many people actually read, I think, but it's a really, really interesting book, which is slightly different to the hyperscaling book, which is by Reid Hoffman. And I guess the 3 key takeaways of the fast scaling book is that hyperscaling only works for 0.1% of the most successful companies in the world with unlimited funding, which is a very tiny fraction of companies. And therefore, it's actually much better to read the book Fast Scaling, because the main concept there, it's all about product channel fit, not just about product market fit. And what I mean by that, or what the author Patrick Felsner means by that, is you can have product fit. So let's say you saw that a nootropic brand with mushrooms sells really well. However, if you don't know how to scale it, so if you don't have a network of influencers, or you don't know how to do performance marketing, you might not have the product channel fit. And therefore, to scale something, you actually have to have a product channel fit and know how to scale and where to put the money into scale. And I guess the final point there is you want to initially get all your points right before you raise a lot of money to start scaling, rather than, as in the case right now, raise a lot of money, burn it, and then kind of figure out how to raise more money to burn it again.
Yeah, no, I haven't read Fast Scaling, but I'm going to read it after this podcast or show. But do you have any favorite online tools? For example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
So my favorite online tool is Telegram, which is a bit of a hybrid between Slack and WhatsApp, with a lot of fun features. We use Telegram as our business tool. We have the same kind of channel function, hashtag functions, and really, really cool emojis as well.
Got it. And if you could go back in time when you started Alphagreen, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
So yeah, that's a really good question. I think we were quite fortunate with a very, very experienced team to execute quite well. And of course, we did some mistakes, but we grew quite well and still growing really fast. I would say that one thing which I would have done differently is probably experimenting with even more growth marketing channels from day one, rather than being very conservative with the cash deployment and putting a lot into just content. Because while content and SEO works, there are actually many other growth channels which also work, but one needs to really explore them, and it also takes time. And therefore, I would have preferred for us to have started earlier than kind of a year into the business.
No, absolutely. That's a great insight. And let's say, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Alphagreen?
Well, people can add me on LinkedIn, or they can, drop me a message on LinkedIn, and feel free to ask me any questions, and happy to help.
Or we'll put the LinkedIn ID on the show notes. Alexej, thank you so much for taking your time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thank you, and thanks so much for having me.